What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio. Transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho, I am the one-armed madman. And with me today, we've got Jeremy Norrie. Jeremy, it's a pleasure to have you. How we doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries, man. It seems like we've got some decent crossover in our history. So a little about me. I grew up in Northern California in a town called Cloverdale. So we were 100 miles north of San Francisco in the Bay Area. And
Nice.
there was a lot of marijuana around. A lot of my friends, families grew marijuana, and my family was not into it, so it was something that I kind of had to sneak into. But I remember I was a dirt bike racer, so we used to go to this track that was like 30 miles away from my house, and they did like Wednesday night practices. And my dad would do his best to get off of work and get home and get the bikes loaded up so we could head out there and get some time in. But he had a real job. He was a lineman, and he worked a lot of hours, and he had to work that much to pay the bills. And I remember one day I was there. I was there by myself in my pickup, and a couple of the guys that were like always around that were a little older than me. They were probably in their early, late 20s, early 30s. They're there, and they've got brand new pickups and brand new trailers. And I'm thinking to myself, one day I'm looking at them, and I was like, I need to do what those guys are doing. Like, whatever my dad's doing is not working. Like, I need to figure out what these guys are doing. And I figured it out a couple years later.
Great. So you have experience in the cannabis
I
industry.
do. I do. I ended up getting into like working in grow rooms, and I lived at a grow house for a while, and learned about trimming. And it's interesting, like learning about plants, right? Because most guys in their 20s don't really learn about plants. So you buy a house in your 30s and there's a garden in it, and you're like, what do I do? But luckily for me, like I know how to work with plants now, and it's not something I really have to mess around with.
Yeah, it is like a universal knowledge in a way where if you learn kind of how to grow this one plant, a lot of that can be used to grow other plants. So yeah,
Yeah, you do like the
that's
whole
great.
mother plant, and you can pull stuff off. So actually, I live in Idaho now, so I've moved on to succulents is my thing here. So I sell succulents out of the front yard is what I'm going to do starting next summer. But I've got a decent setup going around, and I started looking into them. I'm like, oh, these are really easy to work with, and they're easy to kind of do. And I've got a really nice spot in my house to grow them. So yeah, it's been an interesting project to start. So how did you get into the marijuana industry?
Well, when I was young, I smoked it because it was fun, and I had a kind of a troubled youth. I grew up very conservatively, and I wanted to be one of the cool kids, and so I like rebelled in my later years. And then I guess I, in a way, became one of the cool kids. I sold drugs out of my house for a while. It was a wild time in my life, and I wrote a book that covers quite a lot of those days uh, because I ended up getting home invaded. I got robbed numerous times. So for me, the early time of pot wasn't growing it, it was selling it and smoking it. And then I learned about that, the differences in the plant from going to Amsterdam and reading High Times magazine and things
Yeah.
like that. And so I became a fan of the genetics. And then as you kind of become a fan of those things, you learn about how the plant works. Eventually, I did grow, I made hash, and it was a wild experience. I threw these events in the cannabis industry that were really well regarded. And so that's probably what I'm the most famous for in that world. But I did all kinds of different things and had all kinds of different journeys. It was a good time.
Isn't it funny how you learn about business from selling weed? Like, I learned about things that I was using like business terms that my buddies just in one ear out the other, like no idea what you're talking about, right? So it was like
Sure.
one of the things that I learned because I lived in Southern California for a few years. So I had the source, and I had the spot to sell it in. So it was a fun like way to do it. And anyways, like I learned about, prices. How do you price something? You like personally, I like the good stuff. I want the A plus plus plus, but your profit margins aren't always there on that stuff. Your profit margins are really good on some outdoor. So if you can find yourself some outdoor that you can kind of pass
Right.
off as indoor because people don't really know what they're doing, you can make some serious money. And it was an interesting like way to learn that, I do have some control over prices, but ultimately the buyer sets prices. I can sell something for as much as I want to sell it for. It still somebody has to agree to buy it for that to be the price. And I'm dealing with that now with I rent rooms at my house, and I think one room is worth something and the market doesn't. So that's just, kind of how it is, and you have to find that equilibrium point.
Yeah, what other people are doing plays a role in kind of what you're able to do, and all of it, works together. And cannabis is a product in the same way that a lot of other things are. It has had a very unique journey of value where the scarcity of it kind of increased the value for a
Yep.
while, and there were all these different things that like created value for certain strains where it diminished it for others. And the journey of the plant in different places is different too. As I did my events, we traveled all over the world even. And when you go place to place, they have different things that are going on. Northern California is very different than Southern California even. And the growing that's going on up in Northern California creates its whole different aspect of community benefits and problems. So uh, I think the business follows all these different things, and it reflects the different areas that you're in, and it reflects those problems that the growers and the sellers are having in those
Yeah.
places.
Yeah. No, I learned about like strains the same way as you did. So like I had a guy who did some really good outdoor. It was good. It wasn't great, but it was really good and it could pass as whatever you needed it to be. It was called Snowcap, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah,
And it's just not a great strain. And people didn't really want it all that much.
sure.
But if you call Snowcap Lemon Kush, it sells a whole lot quicker for a whole lot more. And it's really, people are attached to certain strains and certain names. And, even me, like I still I still remember my favorite was blackberry. I loved a blackberry strain,
Okay.
I loved that purple stuff, but
An old one. I love the blackberry strain too.
yeah, there was this shop in Santa Rosa, California that had this blackberry kush. Still to this day, I don't think I've ever seen anything better than it. And it was also another interesting thing that has changed the industry a lot is the internet, right? So when I
Absolutely.
was growing in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, nobody wanted to teach you, nobody wanted to give you a recipe. It was like, I have the best shit in town, and if I give my neighbor my recipe, now I'm going from 4,000 a pound to 36 a pound. And I'm not going to undercut myself, so I'm just going to keep my recipe secret. But now you can go to someone like you or go to somebody on YouTube, and you could probably, like, I haven't looked into this, but I would imagine that, like, you could probably find some of the best growers in the world on YouTube showing you exactly what to do. And that's so cool to me.
It's cool, and it's one thing like it's bittersweet because I experienced the same thing as you, especially making hash. A lot of the hash techniques were kind of
Yep.
guarded,
Yep.
right? And so as you kind of learn this or that, um, and you taught other people, and there was a little bit of the market is so big that it doesn't hurt me to share my knowledge with the people, and this like immediate effect that you might have in a smaller community wasn't as noticeable in the medical community during like some of the earlier hash days in Southern California selling to the shops, right? But uh and I'll also say like when I first start we were very early on the dabbing scene, and we made BHO like very early on,
Hmm.
and so I would take it to shops and they didn't know what it was, and I would have to kind of explain it to them and then try to demand the price that I would get from certain places. Some places totally understood, pay the price right away, no problems. Some places like couldn't understand it at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
There was a whole learning curve on all of that. And that changed. I remember kind of I stopped selling to the shops and I was doing other things. And then I remember going, we were throwing our event, that was a competition for hash makers. And a few years into the event, I remember kind of going back to the stores and kind of seeing like, wow, this hash that I was having trouble to get into many places now it's in every single store,
Yeah.
and a lot of variety even sometimes in different places. And so I thought, wow, this market has dramatically changed, and it exploded and exploded. And then as it got really, really big, then it was like, oh, now in fact, even to me, just as I had in my small community, I taught some people and then they would take less money,
Hmm.
and then that would drive the price down for me to the point where I wasn't able to make it in a profitable way anymore. And I thought about those people that used to guard those techniques, and I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
in a way they were right,
And
you
they
know.
they were, exactly. Like, so my buddy knew everything. He's still to this day one of the smartest people I've ever met. Like, just a really smart guy. And he had family that had been doing this shit for so long. So he was learning since he was a little kid. And like, we knew how to make bubble hash, right? You get the bubble bags and you get the cold water and you freeze your ass off all day stirring and draining bags. And it's a nightmare. It sucks, but you get good bubble hash out of it. He started making this stuff, and I don't know exactly what it's called. We called it crumble back in the day. It was just like this whitish type of stuff, and it crumbled down into powder. You see it everywhere now. But like when he first started doing that, I remember the first time he showed it to me, I was like, what the fuck is that? Is that crack or something? He's like, no, no, no. And he puts it on top, and you just get the flame near it, and it just
Yeah.
just disintegrates into nothing. You're just like, holy crap. And he would not show anybody how to do it. Like his house was kind of an open house. People were always in and out. But when he made that shit, he's like, everybody out. Time to go. You can come back in 2 hours. And like
Yeah.
he was like back this was so crazy to me. He built this grow room in his house. It was and we were in high school still. So like, I'm not even allowed to be touching this type of stuff. My parents kind of didn't care towards the end, but at this point, like it was still outlaw shit to me. And so he built this 2 light room in a bathroom that they had in his house. And he's showing, every day we go over there, I look at him, man, this stuff's gonna be fucking killer. And he called me up one day. He's like, hey man, I'm gonna pull. Come over and smoke with me later. And this was, you know, after it was
Sure.
dried and everything. And I come over there and I go, all right, let's do it. And he pulls out a jar of wax. And I go, where's the weed? And he goes, this is it. I go, oh my God, you hashed your entire room?
Yeah.
And, back then that was crazy. You're like, you can't
Yeah.
hash that entire room. That was like a pound of weed. What are you doing? But
Yeah.
that was what he did. And it was so cool now looking back on it that he had the balls to do something like that.
That was our days. Like, it went from kind of the leaf material to nug run. And then we looked at all cannabis as pre run. That word kind of came around because running is the word for kind of making BHO hash. And it
Mhm.
sounds like what your friend was doing is probably that.
Yeah.
And uh, then the material is just that's just product for my tubes. That's
Yeah.
just product for putting in my hash machines.
Yeah. How did
And
you figure that out?
well, we didn't figure it out, so
Somebody
it
else
was
did.
a technique that was brought down. It basically, there's a couple people that claim to be responsible for this. In general, I would say there was a website called Overgrow, and it was mostly Canadians, but it was all over the world people on this. And at the time, the cannabis community was small enough that it was basically everyone in the cannabis community all over the world were on this website,
Mm.
sharing knowledge, communicating in this way and that way. And it was the database for all cannabis knowledge. And it seemed like some kids on there, maybe some adults actually, kind of took an older technique and used butane instead of some more harsher material, chemicals that were
Yeah.
used previously. And it worked out for them. And they were able to kind of make the first BHO hash oil things from, it's essentially like a pipe bomb where
Yeah,
you just,
no, I've seen it done now, for sure. Like,
And
I've seen it done a bunch of times now, but, like and I've done it myself a couple of times. I just have not gotten great product out of it when I've done it. Like, I didn't, like, get rid of all the butane. Like, I never even smoked the stuff that we made because it just turned out so bad. It was like, "There's no way we can smoke that." And I think we were using, like, horrible, Mexican brickweed when we were living in Southern California at the time, and, like, it just didn't work, and we just gave up immediately on it, and it's like,
sure.
let better people figure it out, and we'll just
Well, we learned kind of the essence of the plant is reflected kind of very, very directly in the butane hash oil. When we would make bubble hash, like you would make great hash, but I would never like smell the hash and be like, oh, that's
yeah,
blueberry. Like
yeah,
it was a different experience kind of smoking the hash, and they had good flavor, but a different flavor
yeah.
than the flower that it was from. And sometimes there was like some small hint of that same kind of profile, but the BHO profile was like super concentrated where
Oh, yeah.
it smelled you would smell the flower and then it was concentrated completely into the hash where you could smell it in the air super strong and there were all these different little refining techniques that kind of became part of what would make finer hash through the open blasting method. And I'm actually one to argue that still open blasting would create a lot better product than some of the stuff that we see out there. But then the machines kind of came around. There was a machine called a Temesium that was the first kind of closed loop system that recycled the butane, and you could
Oh, cool. That
kind of
was I was
do
gonna ask
all
you
the
about
different.
that next, if there was any, like, big machines that were gonna
Yeah,
just
and
pump it out.
that's created
That's
a whole
cool.
industry for these machines. And there's like a place called Extraction Depot out here in California, and it
Oh,
might
you
be
just
other places.
bring it in and they do it for you? That's cool.
No,
Uh
they sell the
oh, they sell the
machine.
machine, they
They
sell the
teach
machine.
you everything you ever wanted to know about the machines. There's every little different
Cool.
nuance about the machine, from gigantic machines that you have to use a crane to use, and you're making hundreds of pounds of material, and
Yeah.
uh, you know, to homemade little systems that you could kind of do yourself. And it's a whole industry that emerged kind of from those early days where we were just like making these things out of turkey basters and PVC pipes
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
doing it in
friggin'
our
pipe bombs,
backyard,
man. Butane
hoping that
pipe
would catch
bombs.
fire. Yeah, it was a wild time.
Yeah, where do you see it going? Like, I kind of when legalization first started, I was against it. Like, I was like, "Screw this." I grew up in Northern California. If you legalize weed here, everybody's fucked. Like, there's no jobs here. It's just fucked. I've changed my tune on it since then because we're clearly not going back to that, and whatever. Like, I don't want people to get arrested for smoking weed and shit like that. But like, I kind of thought that it was gonna go in like a big box store type direction where you were gonna have some big like distributor or some just big massive warehouses, and then you go to the. Is that kind of what's happening now?
Yeah. So I'm doing a documentary about this subject. That's what I do professionally now. Is I'm a filmmaker. My website's called theskyisland.com. You can type my name into Google. You'll get my IMDb page, and that takes you to all the films. You can watch them for free, or they're commercial free on Amazon. A little self promotion there. Um, the film I'm working on is basically about exactly what you just talked about. It's from the transition from medical cannabis, well, from illegal to medical to recreational, and what happened to all of these freedom fighters that risked their life to get medical marijuana and any sort of legal achievements for cannabis over the time from the 60s to now.
Mhm.
And 99.999% of them are cut out of the current model of cannabis as a business. And so I know them all personal. Well, I know quite a lot of them personally. And so I found some of the ones that are a part of this story. I went and interviewed them. And largely, basically, the way they feel about it was that they were used or something similar to being used is kind of what happened, where the people who are involved in the recreational movement were not involved in trying to achieve any sort of uh, legalization or reduction of penalty for cannabis growing prior to that. And a lot of the people that were involved in the medical aspect were promised things that were cut out for them. The growers in Northern California specifically were
Yeah.
promised 5 years or numerous things. They participated in these various ways, putting their names out, and then that was kind of taken away from them. So the stories that these people are telling me are uh, kind of like rags to riches to rags
Yeah.
stories, and they're really tragic.
Yeah, it's so
And
sad. Like
yeah,
I know people who've been destroyed by this whole thing, you know? It was like there was a guy up in Northern California, I don't remember his name, but like he just had this beautiful property and he let people come and grow their own weed on his property and you know, he got railroaded and sent to prison and you know, then again he got out and they kind of said, "Okay, you can do it," and they sent him to prison again and it's just it's so tragic and like I know people who, you know, went to prison, lost their families, lost their jobs, their kids, lost everything, their homes, all their life savings. Like I knew a guy who had like a race car. They took his friggin' race car, like everything. And like those people are still fucked today. A lot of them are still in jail, you know,
mhm.
for something that's completely legal now. And like these big corporations are just sitting pretty. It's like, yeah, we went in, stole all their tech, stole all their recipes and you know, let them sit and rot in jail while we took over their area, you know? It's like it's how you kill a drug dealer without killing him. It's like, "Hey, we want to come in and take over this guy's territory. We'll kill him." But you know, just all that really
There
is sending him to prison.
there is a bittersweetness to this because, like you said, a lot of the big corporations that came in were actually from Canada at first.
Mm.
We have uh, legalization in California in certain states, but not federal legalization. So the big players in this game still are too afraid to enter in. We don't have the Coca Cola's
Yeah.
really involved yet.
Pfizer.
Maybe touching, but it's not what it, Amazon isn't involved yet. Like these places that could ultimately really impact the market in the future aren't involved yet. And so you have these super big investors from all these different areas that have come in and they've lost all their money, like millions, billions. Like it's crazy. Some of the big losses that we've seen, companies like MedMen, where they came in, there was this big story about, oh, the Apple store of weed, and it's in
Oh yeah, I
everything
remember
all
hearing that.
over. And everyone's talking about, wow, this is the new way. Oh, you don't have to be a dirty hippie anymore. You go into this cool place. And but ultimately nobody's using these places because of all these other things that are wrong with them, and they've struggled until now. And so now you do have a legal model that seems to be growing and there's some sort of profit, but it's really, really unclear on who's actually succeeding in this and who's just an illusion of success.
Mm.
And a lot of this is a big game for all these companies, like trying to appear that they're successful. Fake it till you make it,
Yeah.
and like the whole realm of all of it. And yeah, all these people that participated in the past, wow, so many of them. You mentioned felonies. There was a while you couldn't even have a felony and have a business.
Yeah.
So you could even if you were lucky enough to have gotten out for some reason, there have been a lot of people that have gotten out, and that's a great thing. Probably the best thing about all of it is that.
Yeah.
But then are they able to participate in the way? I'm not sure that they are, and so it's a really, really terrible thing. That's why we were doing this documentary, and hopefully it does well. But my cannabis stuff doesn't do so well. The stuff about in my films that does really well is what I call strange phenomenon.
Mm. What's that?
So, strange phenomenon would be Bigfoot,
Ah,
UFOs,
yeah.
ghosts,
Okay. Yep.
all
High
that kind
strangeness. I got you. I got what you're talking.
of
Yeah. You
this.
know,
We made cannabis and medical cannabis films. They did okay, like not really that popular. I made a film about my events. It's called The Secret Cup, and That's about all the hash
Mhm.
competitions. And our bigger event I eventually threw was called Chalice Festival. And not a popular movie.
Hmm.
And we've done some other stuff in that realm, not popular. So this
It's a
new
bummer.
cannabis topic, we're hoping will be controversial and more popular, like our strange phenomenon
That's
stuff is.
cool. Perfect. We'll talk some about strange phenomena here in a minute. One of the things like that I did want to ask you about these big corporate entities. So like we're seeing right now, if you watch the news, like everybody's freaking out over RFK is going to come in and clean house on us because we're poisoning everybody. Like I don't believe for a second that these companies are going to make, organic weed or anything like that. Like I'm terrified of what they're going to put into this stuff. I've
Yeah.
seen people who don't know what they're doing, who nuke their plants right before they, oh, we got mites, let's nuke them, or I've seen people, I remember I saw this we were at a concert a couple months ago and somebody was showing me his weed. He's like, "Oh, look at this weed. It's so good. Look." And he's flicking it and he's going, "Look, the crystals just fall off." I'm like, "Dude, that's not crystals, it's mold." Where'd you buy that? Like somebody screwed you and ripped you off. So like those are kind of the things that worry me a lot is we're going to get some sort of frankenweed that's not actually like the organic good stuff. Like if I grew weed, like it's not A plus plus plus, but it's good enough and it tastes good, it smells good. Like I know everything that I put into it. And to me, that's important.
Yeah. So the kind of culture of growing weed originally prior to medical was homegrown. Basically, it was really hard to get a strain that you wanted from some person that was selling weed. You generally were like good weed, bad weed, and that was your options. And maybe he had a couple different kinds of good weed at best.
Yeah.
You heard about all these different seeds. If you were like paying attention to the breeders, there's all these things that you had to grow yourself if you wanted that experience of
Hmm.
that type of strain. And then it eventually moved away to where that nobody does that really anymore. Um, Pretty much people exclusively just buy from the stores or from their people that they know. And that has worked up until now. And one of the problems that is happening in cannabis is exactly what you just said. So even though all these new legal shops have all these parameters where the argument is now the weed has to be tested in all these
Yeah.
varieties.
I don't believe you.
It's supposed to be healthier. So this now the product that's in the store is supposed to be healthier because it's now gone through this like process of testing and checking
Regulations, we can call
et
it.
cetera, and keeping it in this and da 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 da, right? And then third party people will go and like buy cannabis or obtain cannabis from these places, however they're doing it, and then test them at another place, and then they're all bad. Oh, turns out 80% of what is available for sale in these recreational stores is failing testing in some sort of a way, or labeling or something, right? And so the illusion that now the product is more healthy because it has now gone through this process, I think is a myth. And that uh, the way that you have the absolute healthiest is the way that you just mentioned. It's you grow it yourself and you know everything that went into this plant. That's going to be the ultimate healthiest way to get your cannabis. And the next best way is to get it from someone you trust. But even that,
Yep.
who knows what little steps might happen here and there to where it's not 100%. You can't guarantee yourself 100%. So the best way is to grow it yourself. And, um, you know, that's I think of the future of kind of where cannabis is going for a little while until we get a better model where this is more reliable and more guaranteed, where you're not having 80% of third party testing on legal products failing the testing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, man. It reminds me, it's like a lot of these shops grow their own weed, and maybe it's their same company, maybe it's a different spinoff, but essentially it's the same people growing and selling it. And it's like the cops going, we investigated ourselves and everything was great. And it's like, well, no, I can see with my eyes that it wasn't great. Like, what kind of investigation are you doing here? Is this just a sham investigation, or are we actually like doing some detective work and some science
Yeah.
here, right?
I feel also like, I don't think that, other than, knowing what mold is as a consumer, kind of some general knowledge that you could have as a consumer of cannabis would help you from almost any potential problem that you would have from buying this pot and then it being bad,
Yeah.
right? So, um, I think the testing, like being a regulation before it is available for sale, I don't think that is actually a good policy.
No,
I
I
think,
agree with you because it's just a rubber stamp.
yeah, the medical days, it was an option. So you were testing it and then you had that available as a selling point on some of your cannabis, but it maybe wasn't available on all the product. And then even that was like, people looked at it, but it wasn't a big part of how people bought cannabis because they were able to smell it and look at it and do all the things
Yeah.
that I think are far more crucial parts to being able to get healthy cannabis. And now you can't do any of those things. You just buy it in these little pre-made packaged things, and good luck.
Yeah,
Uh,
good luck. The places around here, like I live in Idaho, so we have to drive to Oregon if we want to buy any marijuana. And I promise, if any cops in Idaho are watching, I do not do that ever. And you know, you can get this far away from it and you give it a little sniff, but like you got to rely on your eyes. And if you don't have good eyes, or if you don't know exactly like what you're looking for, and if because sometimes even the people that are selling it to you don't know what's going on. If they, I know more about marijuana than everybody in most of these shops in Oregon, just
sure.
because most of them are just, minimum wage employees and have nothing. Oh, they smoke weed for fun. It's not like they actually know anything about it. And I'll ask them. I always, if I was going to buy something in there, I'd say, give me your, best. What do you think your best B bud is? Your lower grade, small nuggets. What do you think and they'll show me this one's the best. And I take one sniff and go, oh, no, 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 no. Let's give me some more. Give me some more. And finally it's like, that one's the best one, guy. Not that one. That one goes away. Goodbye. Like that's your best one right there. And most people don't have that ability. Like I've got friends and people who live like land, tenants who live around here that I've had that just don't have that ability, and they'll come home. Oh, look at this, check it out, and it's like, nope, you bought the wrong thing again, bud. Sorry.
Yeah, I think flour is its own thing, right? And the testing and all the way that people buy flour, it's like it's better to do that in the way that it has been traditionally done over time. I do think that edibles and other, pills and various different tinctures and the testing is great for all of that kind of stuff because the people who are using a lot of those products are going to be your medical patients. Those are like really, really important factors for people that are sick and sure, you want those to be accurate, A, and you want those products to have, dosing that is relatively reliable. You don't, it, we used to have this situation where the products were like some potentially crazy strong to not, you don't even feel them at all. And labeling was not necessarily always accurate. So I do think that's good. But it also has to be accurate.
Yeah.
So the tests are happening, and then those products are not accurately labeled. Well, what are we doing?
Yeah, somebody has to be testing the tests also, So where do you think we're going with like overall legalization in the country? Like how far off do you think we are? Do you think the feds are going to stick out of it, or are they just going to come in at some point and say we're sick of this,
Well,
ambiguity and we're going to end
in
it?
California, the big argument right now is what's going to happen to scheduling of marijuana. So both Republican and Democratic parties said they were in favor of rescheduling the plant from Schedule 1, which is like no medicinal use, to Schedule 3, which is like allowing testing and what have you. But the other aspect of rescheduling it to a Schedule 3 means that with the current understanding, there's going to be FDA regulations involved now with cannabis. And then the places where you would sell cannabis would have to be a pharmacy. That would be
Oh,
federal. So all places everywhere would have to now comply with this. And so if that becomes the situation, well, what happens to all these stores that
yeah.
we have in California? So there's a couple arguments. So maybe somehow they allow these stores to apply for some sort of like other license that makes them a pharmacy for cannabis only, or they create some sort of a thing that fits this potential model so that it doesn't have to flow into regular pharmacies the way that they are, or that a current pharmacy that does exist could just apply for this other thing and then maybe sell out of the pharmacy that way. A lot of people don't think that's what's going to happen. A lot of people think they're just going to let regular pharmacies sell it with whatever regulation they're going to have, and it'll just be an additional marketplace that goes in, and then however each state is currently doing their current model, medical or recreational, they're just going to continue to have that, and those types of markets will be competing with each other.
Hmm.
Uh,
Interesting.
the other side to that is like California's model of sales. The closer we come to federal legalization, it's much more likely that they adopt this type of model because the prepackaged, what happened in California was we had distributors come in that were basically from the alcohol. Well, the model was from the alcohol industry. Some of these people might actually be from the alcohol industry that are now currently doing distribution of cannabis.
Which would
And it
make
created,
sense.
yeah, it created this third party thing where you used to take your cannabis into the store, sell it directly to the guy who is then selling it directly to the people at coming into the store. Now you sell it to a person who then takes that to all these different stores and then sells it to the store, and then the store then sells it to the person. So it's another place of disconnect from getting to the actual person that you're trying to sell to. Uh, some of our events were the absolute best, where we would have growers, they would have booths, and you were buying directly from the person who had grown it or made the hash. And so that ultimately is the best scenario. And some places were able to incorporate that sometimes, but what we have now is this distribution system that has essentially ruined the way that cannabis works and created this time delay for getting cannabis onto the shelf, and these various like hurdles that you have to jump through as a legal company that some of the bigger stores said it's impossible for them to put fresh cannabis on their shelf for people to buy in the way that they used to be able to. So you know, these prepackaged uh, cannabis products are likely to be the model moving forward. A lot of them you can't see into them at all. You can't even see the pot.
Mm.
It's like illegal to have certain things available. Yeah, it's a really weird model. And then the other thing that's interesting is as you go into these stores, a lot of them tell you different things. So I have a medical card that allows me medical amounts. But if I go into a store in Berkeley and I go into a store in San Jose, they might tell me totally different things about what I'm allowed to do
Huh.
and what I'm allowed to possess or buy from them. And I think that extends to other parts of how this all works too. That these stores are cutting corners in this way or that way. I know there's this new black market where they're, oh, this cannabis that we got, we can't sell it. Oh, it's bad, bad news. We can't sell it. And then they sell it under the table
Yeah.
and get insurance money for the cannabis that they're like not able to sell.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there's
Scams.
all these
There's
new little
yeah.
loopholes that are coming where people can still get their money, and it's creating ways for these businesses to profit and continue, but for the ultimate person buying cannabis, more problems.
Yeah.
And
Anytime the government gets involved with something, you get loopholes and scams. It's just kind of baked into it, right? So I had a buddy, he's my uncle actually that I worked with in Northern California for a time, and he knew this old guy. We would go out to his place and do some tree work for him time to time, and he grew weed, and he grew some really good weed. And we were out there one day, and I was asking him. I don't remember exactly what I was asking him about. I think it was like a big bone or something like that he had in his house. I was like, "What the hell is that from?" He's like, "Oh, that's a Bigfoot leg." You're kidding me. That's a Bigfoot leg. It's not a Bigfoot leg. He's like, it's a Bigfoot leg. He's like, they're all over the place here. He's like, there's a family of them that live over in this area, and I go out and hunt that mountain every once in a while, and they'll come over, and I'll hear them outside my tent at night, and sometimes they'll pop out, and you'll see them watching me throughout the day. And I totally believed him. I didn't believe in Bigfoot until then, but that guy like fully sold me.
I, does he still have the bone?
I
Can you
don't
get it?
know. He wouldn't give it up. I asked him. I was like, "Can I take it? Can we like go?" He's like, "No." He didn't want anybody to come out there and kill him. He was like, "If people find out they're here, they're gonna come and kill him, and I don't want that."
I've heard these stories, right? And so my job as a documentarian is I'm not, choosing who is telling the truth. I'm going to tell people's story and present their truth. And so, you know, there's not a lot of great evidence when I'm doing all this stuff. Certain things have a lot of evidence where you're like, wow, this is really redundant. It seems like something's going on here. The Bigfoot stuff, um, like there's evidence that people have, and people are very passionately convinced of their personal experiences. But there's like lots of turmoil between people that are into this subject with what they think these things are, what they think they are not, things that they think are possible, things that they don't think are possible, and even people's evidence, like this person's faking it, this person's video is real. And, there's no consensus on any of it, really. And as far as like testing results and things like that, there's rumors, but there's no like really hardcore database or anything like that where you can see like government redacted files where they're
Yeah,
talking about hiding Bigfoot or anything like that, or uh, scientific studies or testing results from labs that show this is this or this is that. So there's a lot of correlated evidence, right? And there's especially historically, where there's
yeah,
all these names for these creatures. It seems like something like this maybe existed once upon a time. And the question is, do any of these things anywhere in the world still exist? Or can we prove the existence of them historically, even that they did exist at one time?
yeah,
So you get little bits and pieces here and there. There's been some things that seem like we're getting towards proving maybe some of these something, but for me, I need more evidence. I
yeah.
love the
No,
stories,
I'm
but
I'm fully with you. Like I believed him that he saw something. Like I believed that he believed whatever that story he was telling me what he believed it. Like again, I'm not sure. The one thing that I typically fall back on is that like a lot of scientists don't have a lot of experience outside of a classroom. So when they say something like, "Oh, we'd see it, like we'd be able to find it," right? They don't understand how vast the wilderness is in just this country, right? Like in Northern California, in one of the most populated states in the country, you can just drive outside of Cloverdale for 10 minutes and be in nothing for another 50 to 100 miles, and that just goes on and on. And I went to Alaska as a kid, and on the way we flew on the way back, we took a cruise ship there and then flew on the way. There's nothing for thousands, just hours
right.
and thousands of miles of nothing. And like if there is something like out there, it's clearly very smart, and there's a lot of space for it to hide.
I love all the stuff. The the forest is vast, and then the fact that these stories are similar but different with some little physical attributes, like oh, this one's gray.
Yeah.
Oh, this one they're this tall. This one they're that tall.
In
Oh,
the Himalayas, they're white.
right. And so there's all these different stories about a similar type of thing that has these different little cultural references. And so it's about finding the evidence, about proving one of these things. Uh, you're absolutely right. It's really hard. There's a lot of personal stories that seem like evidence, but you just don't have enough to be able to say conclusively that that's for sure what it was. And then I do all these different documentaries about all kinds of different things. and our brains are really just and our eyes, they're just not super reliable. Weird
Mhm.
things happen to people,
Yeah.
and so there's like that little part where somebody has an experience. They're like, I'm telling you, I saw this thing, it was proof. There's a little bit of doubt where you're like, well, maybe something in there makes this not 100% true.
Yeah.
And you some people say wild stuff. They're like, oh, Bigfoot dematerialized in front of my eyes.
Oh, shit.
So when
Yeah,
you're
that's
going to make
fun.
a claim like that, well, now we have to have some sort of evidence about that, because that's kind of a big claim. And so as you kind of, some people think Bigfoot's not a primate or a monkey or an ape or anything like that, that it's a human type of thing that's living out there. So if that's the claim also, well, now we're going to have to kind of prove this, right? So I had dogs. Dogs leave hair everywhere.
Yeah.
Like my house covered in hair. Where's the Bigfoot hair?
Yeah.
We need to find some of these things that seem attainable. That maybe you're not going to be able to get a body or something, but we should be able to get something more
Yeah.
to where you know um, maybe some sort of excrement.
That's what I was thinking. You gotta be able to that's a big shit, right? It's gotta be a big shit. If you step in that bad boy, your boot is packed.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I think we're all adults. Evidence is evidence. I'll take anything anyone has,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
what we want.
There's some great stories, man. Like I don't know. I heard another story and they all blend together, but I heard a story once and this could have been this guy's story or it could have been something I heard on TV, but like there's a story of somebody getting drug in a tent and they finally stop and he pokes out and there's a Bigfoot there and so he kind of gets out and goes and starts making his breakfast, makes some coffee, takes a chew. The Bigfoot grabs his chew and dumps it in his mouth and starts spitting it all over the place and chugging the coffee. And it's like, that's a crazy story. Like, who comes up with shit like that just out of nowhere? Like, I've never been the type of person who like feels the need to lie about how big the fish I caught was or, what I saw
Sure.
out there. Like I don't know. Like a lot of these old timers in Northern California that I've met that believe in that shit are no bullshit people. Like the guy I told you about, he lived 40 miles outside of town. He never came into town. Like somebody brought him his groceries. And like,
Yeah.
what purpose did he have to lie to me as a 15-year-old kid? You know?
Some of these growers that I knew told me Bigfoot stole their weed,
Yeah, I
and
could.
that they knew big families of Bigfoot that lived on their property, and et cetera, et cetera. And like I was at a meeting of Bigfoot enthusiasts where one of them said in Oregon he knows a guy and he goes up and eats with the families of Bigfoots and have you like
Man, that'd be cool.
if these things are true, then we should have some pictures. We
Yeah,
should have evidence. Like it's within reason to request these things if these this is so easy, you see them all the time, it's no big deal. Like we should be able to get some things that prove that these things that people say are true.
yeah,
But humans are a really interesting thing.
you are
We
right.
both are purposeful liars but
Yeah,
also easily deceived. And there's all these little tricks where you can look at a thing and see something, or look at something and not see something,
yeah,
and then you play the trick, and then all of a sudden your eyes do the thing, and then boom. And you can even watch certain things right before your eyes, where I'm going to turn this thing, it's shaped this way, and you're going to see it that way. And there's all these weird little things that our eyes do. And I've done projects on hallucinating and psychedelics.
hell
And
yeah.
if you dream every single night, you're hallucinating. If you've ever woken up in a dream, which I've been working on this and I've been able to do this a few times,
Oh, like waking dreams?
where you're in a dream, you realize this thing that's happening to me, even though it seems flawless from reality, like it is real. If
Yeah,
you wake up in it, you have to start telling yourself
yeah,
this isn't. And you're like, it's obvious, of course this is real. It can't not be real because
Yeah.
everything about the experience says that it's real.
Yeah. I
The
was
same
flying
thing
away
with
from aliens all night.
sometimes it's just things that happen where I'm like, oh, I'm looking for my car. My
Yeah.
car's not where it's supposed to be parked. I can't find my car.
Yeah.
And then be like, wait a minute, I don't even own this car anymore that I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
You know,
I'm in a dream.
yeah.
And then if you can turn that and realize, oh, you're in a hallucination. Hallucinations can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And it can happen all of a sudden. You can hallucinate things all of a sudden.
Yeah. So actually, I'll
Mhm.
tell this real quick and then I've got something to piggyback on that. So I remember I've heard this before and I've heard it both ways, but I have heard that like when the first ships started showing up into the Americas, like the natives couldn't see them. Like they could walk right by them and not because it was
Right.
something that was so far outside of their reality that it didn't even register to their vision. Now, I've heard other people say that's bullshit. You're just, calling these people stupid,
Sure.
and like I could see it being either way, honestly. Um,
I've heard that too, and I feel the same.
yeah. As far as like the hallucination thing goes, so my co-host on the podcast, he just started a new company called Get Happy, and so him and his wife are into bad music and they like to party, and they kind of quit doing drugs because like all of their friends were dying of fentanyl overdoses, and just like you get a gram of cocaine and it's got a ton of fentanyl in it, and you're fucked, and so they were kind of like, can we do something better? So they started looking into things and they found a plant called kanna, which is a South African succulent that has been used by the natives for thousands of years for hunting. So they'll like shoot the rhinoceros with the one arrow, poisoned arrow, and then follow it for days until it finally dies. So they take kanna while they're doing that, and it gives them like energy and it gives them like a connection to the earth, to the food, and they have this like spiritual experience when they kill the animal. So he's gotten himself a hold of this stuff, and he's got a company revolved around it now, and he says that it's just like MDMA or ketamine or something
Oh,
like that, but it's completely natural, totally legal as of right now, and no hangover on it, which is
no,
just incredible to me. Because, like, yeah, I've had friends that have overdosed and died, and a lot of times, and like I'm under the impression that like everything that we need as people exists on this planet in one form or another. We just have to figure out how to utilize it. And like
yeah.
super cool that he's been able to do that.
Yeah, and I've done these psychedelic projects where we studied ketamine clinics,
I take
and
ketamine, by the way. I take it every day.
okay.
Yeah.
So the adoption of these chemicals into mainstream health applications is rampantly coming. One of the things I'm most excited about with the new administration that's coming in is because allegedly they're very open to these things being more available, and so that's good. Anything that we got to do to get veterans access to these
Yeah.
things and other people that could medically benefit from these types of things, that's step one. That should be really ramped up
Yeah.
and streamlined forward the most quickly. And then just the counteracting of our alcohol culture.
Yeah. Oh,
Alcohol is
alcohol's the
poison,
worst. It's the
and
worst.
cocaine goes right alongside with alcohol, and this is a plague to our society. And I think recreationally being able to take some of these other types of things in other situations is a benefit, and whatever we can do to reduce the use or how the consumption of alcohol in abundance too.
Yeah.
All of these things are good directions. I feel like psychedelic drugs in general are all the drugs that are good. Like the drugs that are really harmful are drugs like heroin and cocaine and
Yeah.
crack and methamphetamine, and
Yeah.
even MDMA is a methamphetamine. That's what
Yeah.
MA stands for in MDMA. But uh, I think that that's a unique drug that seems to be really, really helpful when used in the right way. And
Yes, it has to be done right. Like I can't even describe how much the ketamine helped me. So like when I got electrocuted working on power lines, I spent 4.5 months in the burn unit, and like right away, I was a drug addict before I got hurt, and I was clean for 5 years. But like right away, I was on fentanyl patches just because my tolerance was still just out of control, and they were just pumping me, full of ketamine through the gills, and it was not fun. It was not fun at all. One night I was like tied down because my face was itching so bad and I was fucked up on ketamine and I'm, hallucinating. And my nurse was a bitch that night. And it was just like one of the worst nights of my life. And so, like a couple months ago, I got this new doctor and I'm always searching for something because my phantom pain is just awful. And so I'm always asking for something new, always searching. And she goes, "Well, what about ketamine?" And I'm like, "I don't know about that." Like, I kind of explained what I just explained to you, and she was like, just give it a try. We're going to give you a low dose. You're going to take it at night right before you go to bed. You're not even going to feel it. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. And within like days, the pain had gone down substantially. And like probably a month later, I was talking to my mother about something, and I was like, I kind of feel like I just feel better since I've been taking this stuff. Like I'm a little clearer, I'm a little more sharp, and I just kind of feel better. And she was like, "Oh, I've totally noticed it. I just didn't want to say anything because I don't want to wreck it. But it's improved my life like measurably."
Yeah, I believe it. I've heard that from other people. And I think that that is one of the things that we're going to get better and better at is using that in the right ways and giving that to people that need it. It's still, I think, relatively expensive in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
And the more we can make that accessible for more people, the better. And other things too. I think psilocybin is going to be a similar type of thing, not necessarily for pain. I know that CBD is helpful for some people for pain. I think there's going to be a stepping ladder of like you can try these various different things, and nothing works 100% for anyone. Even medical pharmaceutical drugs are not 100% effective for everyone. So all these different things are going to be effective for some people, and some people are going to need to try and find which thing works for them.
Yeah. Jeremy, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. We didn't even get to sci-fi talk. We'll have to do this again sometime and go
Yeah,
down that
anytime.
rabbit
Yeah.
hole. Right on, man. Well,
I
good luck.
have some UFO stuff coming up early next year, so
Cool,
feel
cool. So
free to
we'll
hit me up anytime.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about UFOs and stuff like that. Yeah, everybody, go out and watch Jeremy's documentaries. I'm gonna watch a couple of them. I'm interested to see your new one on cannabis. Like, I kind of agree with you that it's kind of boring, even for like people like us who are into it. Like, I've kind of seen it all, heard it all, but it's important that like people who aren't necessarily familiar with this world, or who, my grandfather's been a Catholic in his entire adult life, and you don't touch the devil's cabbage. And within the last few years, he's on CBD now. So there's been like, I've
Sure,
seen
sure.
movement like in my life. That's a big deal, right? To go from thinking something's evil to being like, wow, this helps me.
It
Like
is.
that's a big movement. So like I really hope that people take this seriously and don't just look at us as a couple of stupid stoners complaining that we can't get our weed. Like I hate it when people pigeonhole us and, oh, you're just these half-baked idiots. Like I was never a social stoner. Like that's not my thing. I used it like medicine.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, how it should be used. I think there are cases for it to be, fun in social settings. Going to a concert, you go see some Willie Nelson, yeah, fire up a bone. But, for the most part, like this stuff can be used as medicine, and you don't have to tell anybody in your life that you're using it. My mother works at the Supreme Court of Idaho. She should be able to use this stuff quietly within her house to help her, medical ailments, and have nobody at her work know and ever imagine that she was doing it. Like, that
I,
should be
I
where we're at.
I agree with you, and I just kind of want to see culturally the popularity of cannabis kind of go back to the breeders and the botany of cannabis. I
Mhm.
love the plant, and as I kind of got removed from the industry, I kind of became aware that I was caught up in all these other things that made me upset when I still loved the plant and I loved the achievements that people were making and the real breeding and all the different nuances of the plant. And so I still love that. I'd rather not care about this celebrity brand or that
Yeah.
celebrity brand, this packaging is flashy, or this company is super cool, or whatever. I want to know about the genetics and the
Yeah.
journey of the plant. And
And
the
I
more we can get back to that, the better.
And I think that that's the way, like, we should be pushing it. Like, screw the Cheech and Chong company. Like, don't order your weed from Cheech and Chong. Like, that's stupid. That's playing into the stereotype. Like, this should be a boutique business. You should be going and, like, I buy steaks from a local butcher. We get eggs from local people. It should be the same exact thing. Go talk to them, ask them what they're feeding their chickens. What are you feeding your cattle? Like, what are you feeding your marijuana? Like, show me the plant. What are you doing? How are you drying it? Like, that's the interesting stuff. Like, that's where the magic happens.
And I dream of a day when this distribution model is gone, and we have a distribution model that's more similar to wine, where you go up to Napa and
Yeah,
you
wine
drive through
tasting.
all these properties. You could go directly to the grower
Yeah.
and have direct access to grower stuff right there for various stores or for individuals. And I think that would be a really wonderful thing to incorporate. And we're going to apparently get cannabis lounges here in California, so
Oh, cool.
hopefully the future is good for cannabis.
Right on, man. Well, again, it's been a pleasure having you. We'll do it again sometime. Thank you. Good night.
Absolutely.